A man is kneeling on a riverbank, 60,000 years before anyone will think to count the years at all. In his hand is a stone the size of a thumbnail. It is yellow. It is heavier than it looks. He turns it once, twice, in the low orange light. And then he does something no predator, no parent, no hungry animal on earth has ever done before. He keeps it. Not because it is food. Not because it is sharp. Not because it will keep him warm tonight, or protect his children, or kill anything, or heal anything, or do anything at all. He keeps it because something inside him has just made a decision that no science fully explains. He has decided that this object matters. Number 1. The question hiding inside every museum. Walk into any museum on Earth and you will find rooms full of glass cases protecting things that, biologically speaking, should be worthless. Gold does not feed you. It does not warm you. It cannot be eaten, planted, or used to cut a single piece of meat. In its raw form, it is almost useless, soft, heavy, and rare for no reason that benefits survival. And yet humans have killed each other over it for thousands of years. Most people assume this is obvious. Gold is beautiful, they say. Gold is rare. Of course we wanted it. That explanation feels complete. It is not. Because long before gold, before coins, before the first city ever rose out of mud and ambition, early humans were already doing something stranger. They were assigning worth to things that had no survival value whatsoever. In a cave in northeastern Morocco, archaeologists uncovered marine snail shells, deliberately pierced, some still stained with red pigment, dating back roughly 82,000 years. Those shells came from the ocean. The cave was 40 kilometers from the nearest coast. Someone walked that distance. Someone carried something that could not be eaten, could not cut anything, could not warm anyone, across a landscape where every hour spent moving was an hour spent vulnerable to everything that wanted to kill them. Why would a starving species, surrounded by predators, spend precious energy carrying decoration? This is where the story actually begins. Not with greed, not with beauty, with something far older and far stranger, hiding underneath both. Number 2. The brain that invents worth. Every animal alive today runs a kind of silent calculation. Is this edible? Is this dangerous? Is this useful right now? A wolf does not admire a rock. A bird does not save a pebble because it is rare. Value, for almost every species that has ever lived, is immediate, physical, and disposable the moment it stops being useful. Humans broke that rule. At some point, in the long, dark stretch of prehistory before writing, before agriculture, before anything we would recognize as civilization, the human mind developed the ability to hold something in its hands and ask a question no animal had asked before. What does this mean? Not what does this do? What does this mean? That single shift, from utility to meaning, is arguably the most consequential cognitive event in the history of our species, and almost nobody talks about it. Because once an object can mean something, it can mean something to someone else. And the moment two humans agree, silently, without language, that a shell or a stone or a feather carries significance, something invisible has been built between them. Not a tool, not a shelter, a shared fiction. And shared fictions, it turns out, are far more powerful than any spear. Number 3. The shells that shouldn't exist. For most of the 20th century, the assumption among scientists was simple, symbolic thought. The ability to value things beyond their function was a recent human trait. Something that exploded into existence around 40,000 years ago in the cave art and carved ivory of Ice Age Europe. Before that, the story went, our ancestors were too busy surviving to care about meaning. That assumption collapsed. In a cave in western Morocco, researchers identified shell beads between 142,000 and 150,000 years old, pushing the origin of symbolic value back, not by a few thousand years, but by over 100,000. These were not isolated, accidental finds. Across the Levant, North Africa, and South Africa, perforated shell beads dating between 70,000 and 120,000 years ago have been discovered at multiple, geographically distant sites, meaning this was not one strange tribe with an unusual habit. This was something close to universal. At Blombo's cave on the southern coast of South Africa, researchers recovered shell beads, an engraved ochre dating back at least 70,000 years, more than 35,000 years before anything comparable appeared in Europe. The implication is uncomfortable for anyone who likes a tidy timeline. The desire to mark something as valuable, to take a natural object and elevate it above all the others around it, was not invented by clever, advanced, modern humans living in some final glorious chapter of evolution. It was there from close to the beginning. It may not even be uniquely ours. Number 4. The other minds that wanted meaning too. Here is where the story stops being comfortable. For decades, the capacity to value the symbolic, to choose beauty over utility, was treated as one of the defining lines between Homo sapiens and every other hominin that ever existed. It was, in a sense, our species' great alibi. The reason we survived, and they didn't. The proof that we were special. Then the evidence from Spain arrived. At Cueva de los Avions, on the southeastern coast of Spain, researchers dated ochred and perforated marine shells, along with complex pigment mixtures, to between 115 and 120,000 years old, and the site was not associated with modern humans at all. It was Neanderthal. The dating placed these symbolic objects 20 to 40,000 years earlier than any comparable evidence linked to our own species. For a moment, sit with what that means. Another species, one we have spent a century portraying as brutish, simple, doomed, was independently reaching for the exact same invisible idea. That some things are not just things. That an object can be lifted out of the category of useful and placed into the category of meaningful, for no reason a predator could ever understand. Researchers now suggest the roots of this behavior may stretch back to a common ancestor shared by Neanderthals and modern humans, more than 500,000 years ago. Which means the question this documentary is asking, how did ancient humans decide what was valuable? May not even be a question about humans. It may be a question about something that was already alive in us before we were fully us. Number 5. Why a shell and not a rock? So why shells? Why ochre? Why these objects, specifically, out of everything lying on the ground? The leading explanation is not poetic. It's almost clinical, and that makes it more disturbing, not less. According to researchers studying these early beads, they appear to be the earliest known evidence of a widespread, nonverbal form of human communication, objects deployed specifically so other people could see them. Not for the wearer, for the witness. One researcher noted that the beads were likely part of how people expressed identity through what they wore, describing them as merely the visible tip of a much larger pattern in human behavior. This reframes everything. The shell was never really about the shell. It was a signal. A piece of information broadcast across distance, across strangers, across time. This is who I am. This is who I belong to. This is what I am not. One hypothesis under investigation is that growing population density forced early human groups to develop new ways of identifying themselves to one another. Imagine that moment in evolutionary history. For the first time, you cannot simply recognize everyone in your world by face and smell and memory. There are too many people now, too many strangers. And so the brain reaches for a solution that has nothing to do with hunting or fire or shelter. It invents a badge. It invents the idea that an object, worn visibly on the body, can answer a question before a single word is spoken. Can I trust you? This is the moment value stops being about the object entirely. It becomes about belonging. Number 6. The color that wouldn't let go. There is one detail in this story that refuses to stay still in your mind once you've heard it. Red ochre, a natural iron-rich pigment, appears again and again across these ancient sites, smeared onto shells, ground into powder, carried for impossible distances. Some of the perforated shells found in Morocco were still stained with red ochre when they were unearthed. It is one of the oldest material obsessions of our species, and one of the strangest. Researchers studying ochre's use point out something important. Its presence cannot be explained by symbolism alone, because the pigment also had practical applications, as an ingredient in adhesives, as protection for skin against sun and insects, as a hide preservative, even as medicine. So which was it? Symbol or survival tool? The honest answer is the most unsettling one available. It was almost certainly both, tangled together so completely that the ancient mind may never have separated them the way we now insist on doing. This is the trap hiding inside the entire question of value. We want a clean origin story. Here is where meaning began. Here is where usefulness ended. But the deeper you look, the more that boundary dissolves. The practical and the symbolic were never two different categories to the people who lived this. They were the same gesture, viewed from two different angles, tens of thousands of years before anyone would think to ask which one came first. Maybe value was never a choice between meaning and survival. Maybe it was the moment those two things became impossible to tell apart. Number 7. The walk that changed everything. Return, for a moment, to that distance. 40 kilometers between the coast and the cave at Tafrelt. A modern human can walk that in a day, maybe less, under good conditions. But these were not good conditions. This was a world without maps, without guaranteed food, without any certainty that the route ahead was safe. Every kilometer carried risk. And yet, someone made that walk. Carrying shells. Carrying nothing the body needed. This is the part of the story that quietly destroys the idea that early humans were simple survival machines, reacting only to hunger and threat. At Mislia Cave in Israel, researchers found shells that had not even been pierced or modified at all, and yet their mere presence, transported far from any coastline, is interpreted as symbolic. Unmodified, untouched, just carried, which means the value wasn't even in the object's craftsmanship. The value was assigned the moment someone decided this particular shell, out of all the identical shells scattered across that beach, deserved to leave the water and travel with them into the dark. Selection, alone, was the act of creating worth. Nothing had to be added to the object at all. A choice was enough. And once you understand that, that worth can be created by selection alone, by nothing more than a decision in someone's mind. You start to realize that gold, money, art, status, reputation, and every economy ever built afterward are all just elaborate descendants of one small, ancient gesture. A human being looking at something ordinary and deciding, silently, that it would no longer be treated as ordinary again. Number 8. The invisible inheritance. Here is the part of the story that should not leave you quietly. You inherited this. Not the shells. Not the ochre. The mechanism. The exact cognitive trick that let a Pleistocene human stare at a snail shell and feel that it deserved more attention than the 1,000 identical shells beside it. That trick is still running, right now, inside every decision you make about what matters. The brand on your shirt, the metal on your finger, the numbers in a bank account that exist nowhere physical at all. None of it is fundamentally different from a pierced shell carried 40 kilometers from the sea. Researchers studying the earliest symbolic objects describe them as marking a critical step in the emergence of modern social behavior, arguing that once symbols were adopted, the transfer of cultural values between people could accelerate rapidly. Value, in other words, was never really about the object. It was a technology, a piece of cognitive infrastructure that let one human transmit an idea. I matter, my group matters, this belongs to something larger than survival, into the mind of another human, without speaking a single word. We have spent the rest of our history refining that technology. Coins, contracts, currencies, reputations, followers, none of it new. All of it the same ancient impulse, dressed in increasingly elaborate clothing. The man on the riverbank, turning that yellow stone in his hand 60,000 years ago, was not doing something primitive. He was doing the single most human thing a creature has ever done. He looked at a world that offered no inherent meaning at all, a universe of rocks and shells and bones that do not care, do not judge, do not assign significance to anything. And he decided, against all of that indifference, that some things would matter anyway. Not because they had to, because he needed them to. And somewhere, in a cave none of us will ever see, that decision is still the reason any of this, money, art, identity, belonging, the whole fragile architecture of human society, exists at all. We did not discover value in the world. We invented it. And then we forgot we had.